In here before. If you're joining me for the first time, thanks for hanging out. We're going to be talking about ESG scores today. These are becoming more and more prevalent, right? We're seeing these in the headlines a lot, and they are also now becoming a matter of public policy. So, for all of us that are business owners, business leaders, or investors, this is something important to be thinking about. Also, really impacting society and how society is shaping. So, those of you that are just concerned citizens, our roles as being members of the public that are informing public policy, that's also very important too. So let's look at what ESG scores are, and then we're going to really get into whether they're a good thing. And, we'll give you kind of a little bit of a contrarian take on ESG scores versus what the world's telling you. All right, folks, we'll be talking about a little bit of legal stuff, not legal advice, consultant or legal advisor, also not financial or investment advice. Let's jump into it. What is ESG? This is just a neat little tag phrase that they've put together for environmental, social, and governance. And what the idea is that companies should be compliant with these goals, be environmentally friendly, have certain social policies, have certain governmental policies, right? So, how is your corporation, how is your business impacting or working with the external world? So the idea is really, are you a good corporate citizen? Now the issue is, of course, and we'll get into this in a little more detail later, is the issue is somebody is really setting these goals for you externally. Maybe they're not the best for you. Maybe they're not the best for your investors. Maybe they don't even fit you or your industry, but you're going to be held to these standards. So ESG is just this concept of bringing these together, and they usually bring it together into a score. Are you good or are you bad? Do you have a high score? Do you have a low score? Really a simplistic view of the world. Why is it important? Because it's becoming a criteria for investors. One thing some investors are saying is, I'm not investing in you if you don't have a sufficiently high ESG score. So you may lose out on investment opportunities. You may also lose contracts. Some companies will not issue contracts unless the ESG scores are at a certain level. So the whole idea that whether you're success or failure depends on whether you get a good ESG score. So this can actually be critical for many companies. You may not be able to get investment dollars. You may not be able to sell anything if you don't have an appropriate score. It is a boon for law firms. There was just an article today talking about how law firms are really using this as an opportunity to sell more business. And what role does a law firm play? Well, first they set up the structure, but also they are sometimes being used as kind of a verification tool to come in there and make sure that the ESG things are actually happening. The article talks about how both investors and external people are looking at those ESG scores and saying, are you doing well enough? Are you, scoring high enough in our ESG world or not? And they don't want to just take the word of the company. They want this external validation. So you can see why big law firms are clamoring for this, because not only do they get to sell the clients with the package to set it up, but then they get to do kind of this ongoing monitor and verification role. So win, win, win. Always follow the money. And, I understand it. I mean, I'm a corporate lawyer myself. I do business law. I understand the need for legal review and legal analysis. But this becomes potentially just a source of revenue for these law firms, and it's something more to sell, something more that many of these larger clients have to buy. They're going to have to buy them in order to participate in markets or get certain contracts. So you've got a locked-in market for a new product. Maybe when some other stuff, mergers, capital finance, other things are slowing down in this slowing economy, this here will continue to truck on as long as these companies want to continue to engage. A great way for a government to push an agenda. So this is where ESG really is more political than they make it out to be, right? It's made out to just be the score of how you're doing. But what is within those ESG targets, right? And a lot of that can be tied to certain political agendas, right? What is important in environmental, right? There's a lot of debate in the environmental world of what is better than what, and we could use electric cars as an example. Electric car, seems great because you're not burning gasoline, you don't have that tailpipe emission. Certainly, to stand next to an electric car that's idling would be a more pleasant experience than standing next to a gasoline car. Okay, but the electric car, in many ways moves the emissions to somewhere else. It's probably a coal plant or some other fossil fuel. It's just being burned farther away in somebody else's backyard. Is that environmentally good or is that environmentally bad? How is the car made? Somebody makes that determination, and we can see from a public policy standpoint, electric cars are being pushed as a great environmental benefit when we really don't understand a lot of the downstream effects. Same with the social and the governance. A lot of these come across as being socially beneficial, benefit certain categories, but it can also be a way to work in agendas that couldn't be done politically. And we're talking about systems of, using quotas or using requirements to push, one group against another. And, there's a lot of debate about the right way to do that, the right way to get to a good society where we have equal opportunity, equal balance. There's many paths there. But when you're playing with the ESG scores, you're going to have to do it the way the people that are scoring want you to. And you really don't have room to say, well, we want to get to the same goal. We just have a different path. So it's a great way for the government to push an agenda through their government contracting, right? We're not going to buy from you unless you have a certain ESG score. We're going to encourage this, right? And also regulators are now in the game. That same article I mentioned earlier came out recently, talked about how regulators want to verify the ESG scores, right? The regulators have a real interest in making sure these ESG things are followed. Many investors are pushing it too, right? You want our money, you want to grow your company, you're going to do this, this, and this. What we end up with now is a kind of cookie cutter assembly line of what everybody's doing. And then you may have companies changing their behavior, sometimes good, but maybe sometimes not societally beneficial, right? Let's talk about the electric cars. Electric cars have a long way to develop, right? I'm recording this video in 2022. GM and others have announced, by 2035, all electric. California, Europe, this 2035 number has become a common number. How do we get there? We're only 13 years away, and the gasoline car is in many ways superior for most people, as far as the ability to refuel quickly, to travel long distances. It's not practical for people in rural settings. The trucks have been limited availability on a full electric basis. Now some of these electric trucks are starting to come out, and we've seen Ford jack their price up monumentally, right? But some investors are saying, hey, you're not getting our capital. We're not going to help you grow. We're not going to be part of your corporate journey unless you do these things. That may block out entire sectors of the economy from developing, right? If you have let's say you have a more fuel efficient way of building engines or doing something, you have some technology, people may not even want to talk to you because you're not on the electric car side of the fence. Even if you might be good for what's happening, you may make the world a better place, you may score terrible on an ESG score because your industry and what you're doing. So the real question is it good? And I think this is one of the things you need to take with a grain of salt, and you need to think about why it's coming along. It's really hard to put all of these complex things into a simple score. And I get the thrill of it, or the attraction of it. How do you put things into something simple, and how can you compare this company to that company when they're complex? At the end of the day, companies are designed to make money for their investors. At least that's the classic approach, right? And that's a changing world too. There's been some changing views on what the missions of companies are. But the classic view is the company is there to make money for its investors. These ESG scores become something else to manage in addition to the core product line. What I think you'll see happen, and I bet it's already happening now, is a lot of companies are doing things in ways to maximize those ESG scores at minimal cost. And so maybe they're not making the full change. Maybe they're not really embracing the underlying philosophy, but they're making it look good on the surface, which is part of why these law firms are coming in. But as we know, anytime you write rules or regulations, sometimes you have people that just comply in form but don't comply with what was really intended. And I bet there's a lot of loopholes in these ESG things. We'd love to hear your comments on that. If you're seeing that in your world, do join me in the comments. Meanwhile, also, if you enjoy this video, please give me a like so more people can see it, and subscribe to the channel and ring the bell for notifications so that we can keep in touch. So let's bring this all together, folks, and do join our mailing list, which you'll see on there. These ESG scores seem like simple. They seem hard to argue with. That's why they're getting pushed. They become very popular. They are a political tool that is kind of working its way through corporate America. But they are part of a broader agenda. And maybe it's not an agenda that you agree with, yet you're going to be forced into it. So we need to keep a careful eye on these, see how they develop, and see if they're a good thing or a bad thing. Because while they have a good intention at the core, they seem like they could be something that's abused. And I'm looking forward to hearing your comments and stories about ESG abuse. I bet it's happening. If you have a story of specific companies, particularly big companies, that are abusing the ESG system, do drop them below. Maybe we'll do a follow-up story on that. All right, folks, looking forward to reading your comments. Catch you soon.